All right, let's start the session. In this particular session, we'll basically discuss about multiple activities that we can do on ECS. We will do a couple of hands-on exercise. One is that we will create a cluster with the Fargate Linux task using AWS CLI. In the previous session, we have used console, but now we will create with the AWS CLI. And then we'll also create a cluster with Fargate Windows task using AWS CLI again. And then we will create a cluster with a EC2 instance. Now we know that Fargate is serverless, right? So the first two demos are using a Fargate serverless cluster. The third one is creating a cluster with EC2 instances. And we'll also see how to work with this feature called as autoscaling. These are the three hands-on demos that we are going to look in this particular session. Now let's discuss about the first task. To do this first task, there are basically four steps. One is that we need to create a cluster and we are going to do this with CLI. Second is we have to create a task definition. And once the task definition is created, we have to create a service and expose the service to public. And then we can access the task via web browser. That means task means we know that it is a container. Let us see the commands. Anyhow, we will discuss in detail about the commands when we are executing them. So to create a cluster, we have a command like AWS ECS create cluster and the cluster name. Okay. And then we have to create a task definition. So to create a task definition, the task definition should be in the form of a JSON file. So create one file. So here I'm creating a file called as fargate task.json and run this task definition file by using something called as register. So AWS ECS register task definition and the file that we have created. So that means we created a cluster, we created a task definition. Now according to our steps, then we have to create a service and expose to the public. Now to create a service, we have very simple command which says create a service. This service we can do it with two ways. One is we can create the service that is private and we can also create a service that is public. If you see at the end, there's I'll explain this command when we are executing it, but basically it is create service. We need to give what is the cluster name, what is the name of the service, what is the task definition file, how many tasks that you want to launch, what is the launch type, okay, and the network configuration. Now, if we say assign public IP enabled, this will become a public task. If it is enable execute command, that means it will not assign any public IP address, then it will be private. All right. Once this is done, we will take the public IP and put that in a browser. We'll be able to see the container up and running. All right. That is what we are going to do. Let me shift to my AWS console to execute this. I'm on my AWS console now. Let me go to EC2 instances. I already have a management host that is up and running. Let me choose this and open this EC2 instance. Okay, now let me connect to this instance. Now it is connected. Let me change to root user sudo space hyphen I. Let's see if there are any files. Okay, there's a folder called as tasks. That is okay. Now let's see whether I'm able to AWS CLI is installed or not. AWS hyphen hyphen version. Okay, you see AWS CLI is there. Now let me see whether I have proper credentials to access the AWS. I'll just give AWS S3LS. Then you see all the buckets which are there. I'm able to see that. That means I'm able to connect to AWS from this particular server. Okay. Now the first thing what we need to do, we need to create a cluster. Okay. First step is for us to create a cluster. To create a cluster, we can use the command AWS. So any command for ECS, it will start with AWS. So AWS and the service name is ECS. What we need to do, we need to create a cluster. So it is create hyphen cluster. Okay. And anything that you need to create, you have to specify a name. How we can specify a name? By using a argument called as hyphen hyphen cluster hyphen name. I'll give the cluster name as Fargate hyphen cluster hyphen level. Let's say this is the cluster name I'm giving. Enter. Now, if you see, the cluster has been created. This is the ARN of the cluster name. Cluster name is Fargate cluster level up. Status of the cluster. How many tasks are running? How many pending tasks are there? Is no task which is there on this as of now. We just created a cluster. Okay, now we finish with the step one. Now the step two, we need to create a task definition. Okay, so let me make one directory. Make directory. A directory name, I'll give it as level up. Enter. All right, and then enter into this directory cd level up. I'm inside this directory now. Let me use vi. I'll give the name of the file as fargate task-task.json. You can give any preferred name. Now, what is this file for? This file is basically for us to create a task definition. All right. Enter. I Now I have my code ready for the task definition file. Let me explain it for you. Here, what is a family? This is simple Fargate. Now the name is hyphen level up. So let me give it as level up. And network mode, it should be there in VPC. Now here you see, it is saying that task role IRM. So I need to give a role for this, for the task to be executed. So how I can give the role? Let me go to my IAM console. Okay, I'm on my AWS IAM console. Let me go to roles. I already created one role. I'll search the role name with ECS. Okay, I have a role called as my ECS role. I have given, we can give Amazon ECS full access for this role, but administrator access is also open for me. That is fine. Now, if you look here, there is something called as ARN. Copy this ARN, go to the code, and then change this. Okay, that is one edit that you have to do. Now the image, it is taken from a AWS ECR public repository, which is HTTP latest. Okay, and the container port, host port is 8080, which will work on protocol called as TCP. Entry point commands sh-c, and it has to run this command here. Okay, this is basically some HTML code. And how much CPU? 256 is the CPU, memory is 512. That is what the configuration it is. Okay, there is no need to change anything else. Let me copy this, and then let me go to the server, paste it here. Okay, so I have created a task definition. So till now I have done two things. One is I have created a cluster. Second thing, I have created a task definition. Now let me run this task definition. How can I run this? AWS, this belongs to a service called as ECS, AWS ECS. Now what basically we need to register to this task. To register that, we need to use register hyphen task hyphen definition. Okay. and it is from CLI. It should be hyphen hyphen CLI hyphen input hyphen JSON. Okay, and the file name. In our case, the file name is Fargate. Fargate hyphen task dot JSON. That is a command for us to create this task definition. Now let me run this syntax. Now if you see, it has created the task definition for us. Okay, just Q, enter. Now if I want to see the task definition, whether this task definition is there or not, I can use AWS ECS list hyphen task hyphen definitions. Enter. Now if you see, there's a task definition that we have created. The task definition name is sample Fargate level up. That is the task definition. Now what we need to do, we have to expose this. I told you four steps. One is that we have to create a cluster, we have to create a task definition file, and we have to create a task definition, and then uh, launch the service and make it public. So launching the service and making it public, we can do that in only one step. So let's say it is AWS ECS. To create, what we need to create, we need to create a service. So create service. On which cluster? It has to create on a cluster called as Fargate hyphen cluster hyphen level up. I think that is the name of the cluster that we have given. So you see, our cluster name is Fargate cluster hyphen level up. Okay, it has to create on this particular cluster. And what is the service name I want to create? Hyphen hyphen service name. I want to give the name as Fargate hyphen service. Okay, so basically we are creating a service. So we are telling it on which cluster we have to create this service and what should be the name of the service. And when it is creating the service, what task definition file it has to use? Hyphen hyphen task definition. Okay, task definition. If I go into this task definition, we will see, you see, this is a task definition called as sample Fargate level up 1. Okay, so this is the ARN. Let me copy this and give the task definition name here. So now if I go into the console also, I can see the task definition name. I'll show you that later. So I got the task definition name and how many tasks that I want to create in this. Okay, let's say desired hyphen count is 1. That means I want to only to create one container or one task in this particular service. Now after that we need to mention the launch type, where it has to be launched. Launch hyphen type. We want this in a serverless, right? In Fargate. So I have to mention launch type is Fargate. Launch type is Fargate, and what network it has to use. Hyphen hyphen network hyphen configuration. All right, and we need to mention basically in this what is our VPC configuration. That means what is the subnet, what is the security group that we want to use. So AWS VPC configuration. Okay, subnets. uh, we have to give our subnet name. So I have my subnet name here. Let me copy that. This is my subnet. Let me copy my subnet and let me give it here. Okay, that is my subnet name, but there's some issue with copying. Let me remove that additional characters. Okay, that is the subnet name. And what security group it should use? Comma, security group is equal to what is the security group. Okay, let me copy paste my security group as well. This is my security group. Okay, I have given my security group. And if I want to run this in the public mode, I have to give something called as, sorry, this is for private. Enable hyphen execute hyphen command. Okay, let us execute this. It is saying that there is some error with task definition option. Okay, I have given something like task definitions, but the syntax is only task definition. All right, let me execute that now. It's saying that subnet ID does not exist. I think in this subnet ID, there is no SE. Let me remove that and enter. Now, if you see, a task definition is created now. Sorry, this is a service. We created a service from the task definition. Is this public or private? It is private. Let us go ahead and check that. I have given Q. So let me go to ECS. So we have created a cluster, we have created a task definition, we have created a service. We should be able to see all of them. So the cluster name is called as Fargate cluster level up. We see that, and you see there is one task which is running on that. Let me go inside that. Now if you see this task Fargate service, click on this, go to tasks. Now this is the task, it is pending. You see this does not have any public IP address, because this one we have created this task for private. There is no public IP address for this. Now let us create a container which should be public. Okay, now let us use the same syntax. There will be no change except for the last one. So instead of enable execute command, okay, it will be assign public IP. Okay, is equal to enable. That means enable this option called as assign public IP. Okay, but now we have already created this service, right? What is the service name we have given? Service name as Fargate service. Now if I use the same name, it will say that we can't create duplicate service names. So I'll give the service name as Fargate hyphen service 1 and enter. Now it is created another service, Fargate service 1, and this one should have a public IP address now. Let me exit out. Okay, let me come here, go to this cluster. Now if you see the services, there are multiple services that are, both the services are running. Let's go to Fargate service 1. Okay, in this let us see the tasks. There's a task here, and let's see the public IP address of this task. This task is running. If you see, this is the public IP address. Now let me copy the public IP address of this task and put it in a browser, and let's see what comes. Now it says, welcome to Level Up. Congratulations. Your application is now up and running on a container in Amazon ECS. This is what the code which is there in a task definition. All right. That is how we can create a cluster with Fargate Linux task with CLI and making the task either public or private. Okay. Next, in our next hands-on exercise, we are going to look how to create a Fargate cluster only, but this time we will choose a Windows task. Now, what will be the steps for this? For this also, we have to create a cluster. For this also, we have to create a task definition, and we also have to create a service and expose the service. All the commands would remain the same, but the task definition, when we are creating the task definition, we will choose the image that is more relevant to Windows. Okay, let us go ahead and execute that. Let me go to my mission here. Okay, now let me create a new cluster. I will say AWS ECS create hyphen cluster. We have to give the cluster name, hyphen cluster hyphen name, and I will give the name of the cluster as Fargate hyphen Windows hyphen cluster. So this cluster is basically for Windows tasks, and let me enter. You see, the cluster is created. Now the next thing what we need to do, we have to create a task definition. Okay. Now let me create a different folder for that. Okay, mkdir, I'll say Windows task. Let me go into that. Okay. Now let me show you my code file for the Windows task. Let me go to my browse Visual Studio Code. Now let's say this is the JSON file to create the Windows task definition. Now here it is saying that put this in the HTML code here, and you see the image. Now from the public repository, it is taking the image from Microsoft public repository image. Okay, the name is sample Windows app, host port container port 80 works on TCP, and you see the ARN here. We need to change the ARN here like we have changed in the previous exercise. Let me remove this, and let me go to my console, copy this ARN, go back here, type in the ARN, paste it. Okay, that's all. That's the only change that we need to do. Rest all will remain the same. I mean, we need to change the image that is suitable for you. Okay, let me go here. Let me create a JSON file. I'll create the JSON file as vi and Fargate win.json. Okay, enter. I'll paste the code here. Okay, now I have created the task definition file. Now we need to register the task definition file. AWS ECS register hyphen task hyphen definition hyphen hyphen CLI hyphen input hyphen JSON and the file our file name is Fargate win.json. Okay, that is the name of our task definition file. Okay, let me execute this. Now if you see, it has executed. Now the next thing, we'll see whether this task is there or not. AWS ECS list hyphen task definition. You see there are two tasks. First one is before one, sample Fargate, the first hands-on exercise. Second is this. So we have two task definitions here. Okay. Now what we need to do? We need to create a service. Let me use the same syntax that we have used previously. So create a service on which cluster? The cluster name that I have created now, I'll give the cluster name. I think the cluster name that we have created now is Fargate Windows cluster. Let me copy this. I'll give the cluster name as Fargate Windows cluster. Okay, and the service name as I'll give Fargate service hyphen win. Okay, task definition file. Now where is our task definition? Let me go here. So you see this. This is a task definition. Let me copy this. Okay, I'm pasting the task definition there. And now the desired count, I'll give the desired count as 3. Okay, I'm giving the desired count as 3 so that 3 tasks, that means 3 containers should create. Okay, and subnets, security groups, I will leave them as it is, and I want a public IP address, so I'm leaving it as assign public IP address enabled. Okay, let me launch this. Task definition not defined. Let's see in this, what is the task definitions? Okay, the task definition is this: Windows Simple IIS 2019 core. Okay, let me copy this. I copied a wrong one. Okay, let me change that. Okay, I hope now it should work. Enter. Now you see it is successfully launched. You see here desired count is 3 because we have given the desired count as 3. Now let me go to the console to see the public IP address. Let's go here. Go to clusters. Now there should be a new cluster which is Fargate Windows cluster. You see how many tasks are running? There are 3 tasks. Okay, running is 0. Let me go there. It is active. Let me go to tasks. Okay, let me open this task. Okay, the status is provisioning, but you see it got the public IP address. Let me copy the public IP address and put that in a browser. Now if you see, I can see the output. Welcome to level up. Congratulations. So basically that means we are able to create a Windows container also by using the task definition, tasks, services, etc. Now let us go back and see how many services are active. Now if I go here, go to Windows Fargate cluster. If you see, three are running, one is active. Let's go to tasks. You see, two tasks are running, one task is pending. It will launch the task also. Okay. So that is how we can launch a Windows task using a Fargate. So now we know that how can we create cluster. We can create a cluster either by uh, sorry, capacity either by Fargate, which is serverless, second one through EC2 instances, and third one on premises, right? Now till now we have created clusters only on Fargate. Now let us try to create a cluster with a EC2 instance. For that, you see there's an option here called as create cluster. Let me go to create a cluster and give the cluster name. I'll give the cluster name as EC2 hyphen cluster. Okay. And I'm okay. This is there in this default VPC. It is choosing the subnets. Okay. Default namespace is E2, EC2. And now here, instead of selecting AWS Fargate serverless, we will choose as Amazon EC2 instances. Okay. Now, as soon as I choose Amazon EC2 instances, it is saying create a new ASG. If you already have a ASG, we can choose that, or I'll leave the option called as create a new ASG. And what should be the AMI? I will choose the AMI as Amazon Linux 2. Okay. And EC2 instance type, because now what till now, whatever tasks we have created, that is creating on Fargate, which is serverless. That means AWS will create behind the scenes, they will create the EC2 instance and they will allocate. But here I want to create the EC2 instances, and whatever containers are creating, that should be created on this EC2 instances only. So I'm choosing my EC2 instance type as C1 medium. Okay. And what is the desired capacity? The desired capacity is 1, and maximum it can go up to 5. That is what I'm choosing. But if I want to increase the size, I can increase the size. Okay, let's say if you want to go based on the load, it can create 30 EC2 or 35. You can keep on increasing the load. So based on whatever your load, you can choose. But here for this use case, we will choose as 4. Now, this is nothing but we are creating an EC2 instance, right? If we have to log into this EC2 instance, we need a SSH key pair, and we can choose one SSH key pair. I have a key pair by name Jenkins. I'm choosing that. Now you see that external instances using EC2 ECS anywhere. So this is like, now if I want to use capacity as my own data center. Okay. Now three options are there, right? One is Fargate, second is EC2 instances, third one is external. That means my own data center. Okay. Select option, create. Now you see the cluster is creation. The cluster creation is in progress. Okay. This might take another moment here. Cluster creation still in progress. While this cluster is creating, let us observe the task definitions here. If we go to the task definitions, you see there are two task definitions. One is sample Fargate level up, one is Windows. If I go into sample Fargate level up, Okay, this is the task definition. If I go here, if you go to JSON, you can see the JSON file that we have given there. Okay, if you want, we can make edits as well. Now if you see, create a new version. If you want, we can create we can revise this particular version. You see there's an option called as deploy. We can either create a service or run a task. Let's say create a service. Now it is asking which cluster. Okay, now once this cluster is created, I will choose this cluster. So basically that means we can run the task definition on Fargate also, on the EC2 cluster that we created also. Okay, let's go to EC2 cluster, launch type. You see here launch type, is it Fargate or EC2 or external? It is EC2. Okay, it is saying that you don't have any EC2 instance registered to your cluster. Okay, that is because this cluster is created. Let us wait for a moment. Now if we see, our EC2 cluster is created and it is active. Now let's say I want to launch a task on this EC2 cluster. Now this is also having auto scaling, etc. Right? Now if I go into infrastructure, there is no container instances. Okay, nothing is created yet. Let's go to services or tasks. Okay, we can, let's say, run a new task. Okay, from where you have to run a new task, you see it has already taking the cluster as this. Let's go launch type as EC2. Okay, it's still saying that there are no EC2 instances registered. Let me see that. Let's go to this EC2 instances here. Okay, it's not created yet. Let's wait for a moment. I think now the cluster is deployed successfully. If you go here, there is no service running, there is no task running. Okay, if I go to my EC2 instances here, you see there are EC2 instance, two instances are created. Okay, now if I go here and let me go to the cluster, let me go to the infrastructure, you can see there is a auto-scaling group which is assigned and the desired capacity is 2. Minimum is 2, max is 5. That is the reason 2 got created. Okay, if we put the minimum and the desired as 3, 3 instances would have been created. And maximum it can scale up to 5. Now if I click on this auto-scaling group, I can see those desired capacity 2, minimum 2, maximum 5. Okay, and you see automatic scaling. So when this has to scale, we can also configure create dynamic scaling, but let's not do that now. All right, now let me go here. Now let's say select, go to task here, select option run a task. We can either create a service or a task. Now the difference is that task means only one container will create. Service is kind of, if a task failed also, it will make sure that it will launch the task again. It is like a replica set on Kubernetes, and task is like a pod or a container. Okay, let's say run a task. Now here let us choose, it should be on EC2. It says you don't have any EC2 instances registered to your cluster. Okay, now let us choose this capacity provider. Okay, now if you see capacity provider, my demo 1 is there. Okay, and the task is fine. Select a task definition family. I will choose the task definition family as this sample Fargate level. Okay, and revision is latest. That is fine. Now you see the task placement, where it has to be placed. Okay, I will leave that as, so multiple options are there. One is custom, random. Let's say if I go to custom, we can choose what is the strategy. Okay, if I say random, it will randomly uh, place the task randomly on all the nodes that are there. Okay, one task per host. If there are, so now we created two nodes, right? One container will be created on one node. Okay, az balanced or az spread. So basically this will spread the containers across multiple availability zones. I will say random placements. Task overrides. Okay, what is the IAM role for the task to override? Okay, I will leave all of them for the defaults as of now. Let us go ahead and create. So now we have launched a task in this EC2 cluster. Let me go here. Let's go to tasks, and you see this task is provisioning and desired state is running. Okay, let me click on this task. It is still showing as provisioning. Let us wait for a moment here. The task is provisioning. Now if you see this task, now if you see this is running here. Okay, now if you see it has a public IP address, let us copy the public IP address and put in the browser. Now you see it has coming up, welcome to level up, because that is what the task definition that we have used. Okay, so in this manner we can create EC2 instances, a cluster with EC2 instances rather than Fargate, and launch a task from a task definition by using Autoscaling Group. All right. So let us recap what we have learned in this particular session. In this particular session, we learned how to create a cluster with Fargate, with Linux task, with a Windows task, and create a cluster with EC2s and working with AWS console. This is what we have learned in this particular session. So we know how to create a task, how to define a service, how to expose it to the public. Right? We have learned all this. Thank you very much for joining us. You guys have a good time. Take care.